I knew something was wrong the moment I heard shouting outside, real, chest puffed, clipboard waving shouting. But nothing prepared me for the sight waiting at the edge of my backyard. A crowd of HOA members, faces red, arms crossed, and fueled by pure entitlement, were standing on my lakeside property like they owned the ground under their feet. At the front of the pack was the HOA president, Linda. The infamous Karen of the lake. Her sunglasses were on, her hair was stiff with hairspray, and her expression screamed the same thing her mouth soon confirmed. "We're here to take control of the lake." She said it like she was announcing a royal decree. Behind her, 2 other board members held folders stuffed full of papers, as if their printed rules somehow overpowered the law. And scattered all around them, this is what made me laugh later, but not in the moment, was the sight of them standing proudly on my docks, claiming their authority while literally standing on something I legally owned. But at that moment, I didn't reveal anything. No. First, I needed to see just how far they were willing to go. Linda barged toward me, heels clicking like she was entering a courtroom instead of my backyard. "We had an emergency board vote," she announced. "The HOA is assuming possession of the lake and all structures connected to it. That includes the docks. That includes the shoreline. And that includes access rights. Everything." I raised an eyebrow. "Everything?" She smirked like she had already won. "Everything." The rest of the board nodded in synchronized self-righteousness. One man even unrolled a tape measure and started measuring my dock, muttering, "We'll have to rebuild these. They don't meet HOA aesthetic standards." Another woman snapped photos like she was documenting a crime scene, except the only crime was her attitude. I played along. "And what exactly gives you the right to assume possession of a lake you don't own?" Linda flipped open her binder. "This," she said dramatically. "A new HOA resolution. Ratified last night. Passed unanimously." I almost laughed. Instead, I asked one simple question: "Did you read the deed to this property? Or the lake rights agreement?" Her smile faltered for just a moment. That was the first crack in their wall of delusion. But I didn't expose the truth yet. Not until they crossed the final line. Not until they tried to force me off my own dock. Only then would I reveal the paperwork that would destroy every claim they thought they had. The moment Linda stepped onto the main dock, my main dock, she acted like she had just claimed new land for her imaginary empire. She snapped her fingers at the board members behind her. "Start marking everything for redesign. This will all need approval before summer." Her voice echoed over the water like nails against metal. I watched them walk around with bright orange markers, placing sticky notes on the railings and scribbling notes on clipboards. One man even muttered, "We'll have to fine him retroactively for the dock's color, and that little boat cleat is definitely non-compliant." Retroactively. For something they didn't even own. I crossed my arms. "You all seem awfully confident for people standing on property you have zero legal authority over." Linda whipped around. "Not for long. As of last night's resolution, the HOA controls the lake and everything attached to it." She tapped her binder like it was the holy book of neighborhood tyranny. "And that means your docks fall under our jurisdiction now." I walked closer, stepping onto the dock beside her. "Do you even know how lake rights work?" She rolled her eyes. "Don't be ridiculous. Lakes follow community rules." Another board member chimed in, "Yeah, common property is common property." I almost felt bad for them. Almost. But then came the moment that crossed the line. One of the board members, a tall guy named Curtis, pointed at me with a pen. "Sir, you need to step off the dock until we finish our inspection. HOA rules say homeowners can't interfere during a compliance review." Interfere with my own dock? I stared at him. "This dock is on my deed. My land. My rights. You're trespassing." Linda scoffed. "The HOA cannot trespass on property it governs." That was it. They had just given me all the proof I needed of their arrogance, their ignorance, and their complete misunderstanding of the law. They truly believed they owned a lake that never belonged to them, and worse, they thought they could bully their way into controlling it with paperwork they invented themselves. But it wasn't time to reveal my card yet. Not until they made one last mistake. As they continued their inspection, Curtis leaned over the edge, placing a measuring tape against one of the dock posts. "This thing isn't even the right distance from the water line," he said. "We might have to order it removed." Removed? They were planning to dismantle the dock they were standing on. That was the final straw. I pulled the envelope from my pocket, the one I had kept for this exact moment, and felt the weight of it in my hand. They wanted a fight. They were about to get the truth. I held the envelope just long enough for Linda to notice it. Her eyes narrowed, suspicious but overconfident as always. "What's that supposed to be?" she asked, folding her arms like she already knew the answer. She didn't. Not even close. I opened the envelope slowly, deliberately, letting the board members watch every movement. Inside was a thick stack of documents, old, official, and stamped with county seals. I pulled out the first page and unfolded it in front of them. "This," I said, "is the original land deed. Dated over 40 years ago." Linda smirked, "And that doesn't override HOA resolutions." But then I held up the second document. "This," I continued, "is the lake rights agreement. Filed with the county. Legally binding. And still in effect." Curtis blinked. "Lake rights?" Another board member mumbled, "Wait, what does that mean?" I flipped to the highlighted section and read aloud. "Full ownership and exclusive rights to construct, maintain, and control private docks located within the boundaries of Parcel A through Parcel G." Linda squinted at the page. "Parcel A through G? Those aren't." I cut her off. "Those are my parcels." She stiffened. "That can't be right." "Oh, it gets better," I said, pulling out the final document. "This is the updated county map showing property lines. Every single dock along this side of the lake? They're built on parcels tied directly to my deed. Not common property. Not HOA property." I spread all three documents across the dock railing like a winning poker hand. "You're standing on land the HOA doesn't own," I said. "And never has." Silence. Actual silence. Even the birds seemed to stop chirping. A board member leaned over the paperwork, tracing the boundary lines with trembling fingers. "Linda, he's right. These docks aren't in the HOA maintained zone." Curtis whispered, "We don't have jurisdiction." Linda's face turned a slow, satisfying shade of red. Her pride battled her panic, but reality was hitting her like a brick. She snatched the documents from the railing, flipped through them violently, and finally snapped, "This doesn't matter. We voted last night. The resolution stands." I couldn't help smiling. "You can vote on whatever you want. But you can't override county property law." That's when I delivered the final blow. "If you try touching a single board on any of these docks, I'll file trespassing charges. And trust me, those will stick." Her jaw dropped. "Trespassing? On a lake?" "On my lake frontage," I said. "On my docks. On my property." The reality finally hit them. They weren't in charge. For a full 30 seconds, the HOA board just stood there on my dock, silent, stunned, and suddenly very aware that every inch beneath their feet belonged to me. The wind rippled across the lake, carrying the quiet tension as they processed the fact that their resolution meant absolutely nothing. Linda's confidence evaporated faster than the morning mist. Finally, she tried to recover. This must be a misunderstanding," she stammered. "The previous HOA president told us the lake was common property." I shrugged. "Then he lied, or he never bothered to read the paperwork. My family purchased this land before the HOA was even formed." These dock rights predate your entire organization. You can't claim something that was never yours. Curtis backed away from the railing, suddenly cautious, as if afraid the dock might bite him. So, technically, we've been managing an area we don't own. Technically, I replied, you've been trespassing. A murmur spread across the board. One woman looked like she was about to faint. Another began collecting her clipboard and sticky notes as if touching anything else might get her arrested. Only Linda clung to her crumbling authority. This still doesn't mean you can talk to us like we're criminals, she snapped. We're the HOA. Homeowners expect us to enforce order. I stepped forward. Order is one thing. Trying to seize private property is another. And now that you know the truth, you're out of excuses. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. This is a recording, I said calmly. Everything you've said. Everything you've done. The threats. The attempted seizure. The forced inspection. All of it. Linda's eyes widened. You recorded us. Of course, I said. You walked onto my property and attempted to take control of it. You gave me every reason to document the interaction. Curtis gulped. So, what happens now? I looked each of them in the eye, letting the weight of the moment sink in. What happens now, I said slowly, is you walk off my docks. You notify the neighborhood that the HOA has zero claim to this lake. And you leave me out of your politics permanently. Linda opened her mouth to protest, but the rest of the board had already begun walking back toward shore. No one wanted to test their luck any further. Eventually, even she followed, bitterness trailing behind her like a shadow. At the edge of the property, she turned back once more. This isn't over. Oh, it's over, I said. And it ended the moment you stepped onto something that didn't belong to you. The HOA never returned to the lake again. I thought the ordeal was over the moment the HOA slunk off my dock like defeated raccoons caught raiding a trash can. But just when I began enjoying the peaceful ripple of the lake again, a message appeared in my inbox, an emergency community announcement from the HOA. And just from the subject line, I knew Linda wasn't done embarrassing herself. Clarification on lake management and temporary access adjustment. I opened it, expecting the worst, and I wasn't disappointed. The email began with a dramatic statement claiming the HOA had temporarily paused their lake takeover to review additional documentation. They made it sound like they chose to step back, not that they had been publicly humiliated on a dock they didn't own. Then came the ridiculous part. The HOA will continue to maintain oversight of all aesthetic considerations related to lakeside structures until further notice. Aesthetic considerations. In other words, they backed off legally but still wanted to boss people around. I couldn't help laughing. Later that afternoon, I heard knocking at my door. When I opened it, I found two HOA board members, Pam and Roger, standing there with nervous smiles and matching clipboards. These weren't the aggressive types. They were the "we're just following orders" kind. "Hi," Pam said cautiously. "We're just conducting a friendly survey about community expectations for lakefront properties." "Survey," I repeated, leaning against the doorframe. Roger nodded quickly. "Strictly voluntary. We just want to know how residents feel about dock appearances, shoreline maintenance, that kind of thing." I smirked. "And by residents, you mean me?" They exchanged a guilty glance. Pam cleared her throat. "So, would you consider repainting your dock to match the HOA palette?" "Purely hypothetically." I raised an eyebrow. "Purely hypothetically?" "No." Roger scribbled something on his clipboard as if documenting my defiance for a museum exhibit. Okay, noted." "And," Pam added, "would you be open to adding HOA-approved lighting along the railings?" "Absolutely not." They wrote that down too, their shoulders slumping with each refusal. "But," Roger said hesitantly, "Linda wants to avoid misunderstandings in the future." That's when it clicked. This wasn't a survey. This was damage control. The HOA knew they had stepped into a legal disaster. Now they were trying to rewrite the narrative, pretending they were calmly gathering homeowner input instead of retreating from a property rights fiasco they created. Tell Linda, I said, that the next time she wants to manage something on my land, she can manage the consequences. The board members nodded meekly and walked away. And from the window, I watched them hurry straight back to the HOA office, no doubt to deliver the message she would absolutely hate to hear. 2 days passed without a word from the HOA, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, they were finally backing off for good. The lake was quiet, the docks were undisturbed, and the only things approaching my shoreline were ducks, not board members with clipboards. But peace never lasts long where Linda is involved. On the third day, just after sunrise, I heard the unmistakable sound of angry footsteps striding across gravel. I looked out my window and spotted Linda marching straight toward my backyard with the intensity of someone preparing for battle. Her hair was pulled so tight it looked like it was fighting for its life, and tucked under her arm was that infamous binder, her weapon of choice. Before I could even step outside, she was already shouting. "This is harassment," she yelled toward my house, waving the binder like a flag. "You are deliberately obstructing HOA operations." I walked out calmly. "Good morning to you too, Linda." "What now?" She stomped onto the grass. "You undermined the board. You made us look incompetent. You humiliated us." "I didn't humiliate you," I said. "You humiliated yourself by trying to seize property you didn't own." Her face turned the exact shade of a tomato left out in the sun too long. "I have been president of this HOA for 11 years. I have never had a homeowner defy me the way you have." "I'm not defying you," I corrected. "I'm ignoring you." "Big difference." That sentence snapped something in her. She opened her binder and flipped to a page so aggressively she nearly tore it out. "The board has unanimously agreed to review your property for multiple violations. That includes landscaping, fencing, and..." I held up a hand. "Stop. Right there." "No," she snapped. "You don't get to tell me." I pulled my phone from my pocket and held the screen toward her. "This is the county property inspector's number. If you honestly believe I'm violating anything, call him. But here's the thing, if you file a false complaint, he'll document it, and you'll be held responsible for wasting county resources." She froze. Her jaw clenched. Her fists tightened. Her binder quivered with rage. "You think you're clever," she hissed. "You think you've beaten me." "I don't need to beat you," I said evenly. "I just need you to follow the law." And for the first time since I'd met her, Linda had no comeback. She turned around sharply, stomping away so hard I thought the earth would crack. "This isn't over," she shouted without looking back. "The HOA will respond appropriately." I watched her storm off my property, her pride bruised and her power slipping. What she didn't know was that her appropriate response was about to trigger another major mistake. It took less than 24 hours for Linda to launch her appropriate response. And this time, she didn't just send board members. No, she escalated. The next afternoon, I heard 3 sets of footsteps crunching up my driveway. When I looked outside, I saw Linda flanked by 2 men in matching navy polo shirts embroidered with the HOA logo. They moved in formation, like she had hired her own personal enforcement squad. She didn't even bother with greetings. "We are conducting an official property investigation," she declared. "You are required to cooperate." I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "Required? According to who?" "The HOA bylaws," she said proudly. I didn't even hide my smirk. "The same bylaws that don't apply to my docks or shoreline." Her eyes flashed. "This has nothing to do with the lake. This is about your landscaping, your fencing, your shed placement, and your compliance with community standards." One of the polo shirt men lifted his clipboard. "We'll need access to your backyard." I folded my arms. "Do you have a warrant?" Both men froze. Linda sputtered. "A warrant? Don't be absurd. The HOA doesn't need a warrant to inspect properties under its authority." "That's the problem, Linda," I said calmly. "My property isn't under your authority. Not the lakeside. Not the shoreline. Not the docks. And certainly not my yard." She jabbed a finger at me. "If you refuse an inspection, you will face fines." I pulled my phone from my pocket again, this time scrolling to a different contact. "This," I said, holding up the screen, "is my lawyer. He specializes in HOA overreach." The two HOA inspectors looked at each other nervously. Linda held her ground. "Your lawyer can't stop an HOA compliance review." "Maybe not," I said. "But he can subpoena every email, every vote, and every communication about your attempt to seize the lake. And he can file a cease and desist order against you personally." Her expression shifted. Fear flickered, but only for a second before pride forced its way back. "You're bluffing," she snapped. I tapped the screen. My lawyer's phone started ringing. Loudly. The inspectors stepped back. One whispered, "Linda, maybe we should." She snapped at him. "Quiet." My lawyer picked up. I put the call on speaker. "Hey," I said. "Remember that HOA issue I told you about? They're here right now trying to conduct an unauthorized inspection of my private property." There was a pause, then an icy professional tone, "Tell them to leave immediately. If they refuse, inform them they are trespassing, and I will file for an injunction today." I looked straight at Linda. "You heard him." For the first time since the drama began, Linda didn't argue. She turned to her inspectors. "Let's go," she muttered. "We're done here." They walked away defeated again. What none of them knew was that the county had just uncovered another problem with their lake takeover attempt. 2 days after the HOA's failed inspection, I received a call from the county clerk's office. At first, I assumed it was just routine follow-up about the documents I'd requested weeks earlier. But the moment the clerk spoke, I knew something much bigger was happening. "Mr. Thompson," she began, "we've been reviewing the HOA's recent filings regarding lake jurisdiction. There are inconsistencies." I almost laughed. "That's a polite way to put it." She continued, "Specifically, they submitted a claim stating the lake was common property owned by the association. However, no such deed transfer has ever been recorded in county records." I nodded to myself. "Because it never happened." "Yes," she said firmly. "And additionally, we discovered the HOA attempted to file a lake management resolution assigning themselves control over multiple parcels legally tied to your deed. They never had the authority to file that." Her tone changed, then sharper, more serious. "We will be opening an investigation into the HOA's leadership for submitting fraudulent or misleading documents." I stood there for a moment, almost stunned. Linda had pushed and pushed, and she had finally pushed into legal territory she couldn't bully her way out of. I thanked the clerk, hung up the phone, and waited. I didn't have to wait long. By late afternoon, HOA board members were gathering near the community mailbox cluster. I saw them talking in hushed whispers, glancing nervously toward my property. It wasn't long before the source of their panic arrived. A white county vehicle pulled into the neighborhood. And out stepped a county compliance officer, clipboard, badge, and zero patience for nonsense. He walked straight to the HOA office, where Linda and the board members were already waiting. I stayed at a distance, but I could see everything from my porch. The officer spoke calmly while Linda tried, unsuccessfully, to maintain her usual superiority. But something was different now. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't smirking. She wasn't in control. The officer handed her a packet thick, stapled, and stamped with official markings. She flipped through it, her expression shifting rapidly from annoyance, to confusion, to dread. Roger, the soft-spoken board member, stepped out of the building with his face pale as a ghost. He whispered something to another member, who covered her mouth in shock. It didn't take a genius to guess what was happening. The county had informed them, in no uncertain terms, that their attempted takeover wasn't just void. It was a violation. A serious one. And suddenly, the HOA wasn't fighting me anymore. They were fighting the county. I leaned back against my porch railing, watching the scene unfold with quiet satisfaction. Linda had finally met someone she couldn't intimidate. The next morning, I woke to a sight I never expected. Linda's precious HOA office, normally locked tighter than a bank vault, stood wide open. Cars were parked crookedly along the curb, board members huddled in chaotic clusters, and stacks of paperwork littered the front desk like someone had shaken the whole building until everything fell out. Curiosity got the better of me, so I stepped outside. I didn't walk toward them, but I didn't need to because the drama came to me. Roger jogged over, panting like he'd run a marathon. You're not going to believe what's happening. I folded my arms. Try me. His voice dropped to a whisper. The county found multiple violations. They said Linda filed documents without proper authorization, misrepresented HOA boundaries, and tried to impose rules on private property. He glanced around nervously. She's in the office demanding the board back her up, but nobody wants to go down with her. I raised an eyebrow. So the mutiny has begun. Mutiny, he said. It's a full-blown evacuation. Back at the office door, I saw it unfold in real time. Linda stood at the center of the chaos like a storm in human form, binder clutched to her chest. She pointed at each board member, shouting accusations. You abandoned procedure. You let him walk all over me. You're all responsible for this mess. But for once, no one bent to her will. People were quitting. Right there. Right on the spot. Pam slammed her clipboard onto the desk. I didn't sign up for lawsuits, Linda. Another member threw his hands up. You said the lake was common property. You told us you'd confirmed it. I did confirm it. Linda screeched. Or I thought I did, or someone must have changed something. The desperation in her voice would have been almost sad if she hadn't caused every bit of this herself. Then the county compliance officer returned. Same white truck, same calm authority. This time, he didn't go inside. He simply handed Linda a sealed envelope at the doorway. Her hands shook as she tore it open. She skimmed the top page, and her knees almost buckled. No, this can't be real, she whispered. The officer kept his voice level. Mrs. Newton, you are hereby notified that you are temporarily suspended from all HOA leadership duties pending investigation. Gasps broke out across the parking lot. Failure to comply, he added, will result in permanent removal. Linda looked up, but she wasn't angry anymore. She looked defeated. Not by me. Not by the board. By the law. The officer turned to leave, and the entire board followed, leaving Linda standing alone in the doorway of the empire she had tried so hard to control. That was the moment I knew. The HOA would never be the same again.